$16,000. Yes, that is how much I have invested in this ugly and rusty EVO build. It's been just over a year and a half since I purchased this rusty car, which ended up having crank walk, but it was a full car, and I have since spent quite a bit of money and time getting it to the condition it is now, where it's actually a nice running, driving, pretty decent EVO in some aspects. But in this video, I'm going to break down the pricing and where I've spent most of the money. It probably won't come as any surprise that most of my investment is right here. This engine has a brand new OEM short block. The head was redone. A lot of other parts had to be purchased for this. And when I did the math, $6,000 is right here in the engine. If you basically just count the engine stuff, if you pulled out an engine and wanted to put it in a different car, that is about $6,000, which is 65% of my additional investment I put into this car, not including the original purchase price. And that's why the EVOs kind of often get parted out, honestly, because even right now, I have this car listed for sale for $14,500, which is less than I have into the entire car. But it hasn't sold yet. It's been up for sale for 2 weeks now, and I understand why it doesn't sell in some ways. But it's just, I think, an interesting dynamic to really point out why, so many of these cars end up getting parted out. I feel personally that this full drivetrain of this car could be worth $10,000 to $12,000 as it is. Plus, you get the bonus of, if you wanted the drivetrain out of this car, you could actually drive it and confirm it's all good. But anyway, back to the engine itself. This engine, of course, now only has 3,000 miles on the actual bottom end of the engine. Brand new OEM Mitsubishi engine. The head itself did have 200,000 miles on it, like the car chassis itself does, but it was reworked and redone to, operate as it should. I also want to point out, and I will link to a spreadsheet in the video description, wherever they put the video descriptions on YouTube nowadays, but I do have a spreadsheet that you can check it out if you want to see a breakdown of everything and where I actually spent all my money. Even though I have $16,000 invested, that's technically money I did spend on parts. I did recoup some of it in certain ways, selling parts that were on the car. Like this came with the EVO 9 turbo, which I put on, but it also came with an EVO 8 turbo, which I had sold. And it came with a better valve cover, which I sold and replaced with one that had a broken ear, because this is the ugly EVO build. And I didn't care if it was ugly, that was kind of the point. So if you want the full breakdown, if you're really interested, I do have a spreadsheet linking all the parts I bought and what I paid for what was new, what was used. Most of this stuff was all new. A lot of OEM components, especially in the engine compartment area. And that's also another reason why I understand this car is a hard sell, a hard one to sell, because when you first look at the car, you're like, well, it's a rusty EVO with over 200,000 miles on it, and that's true. But most people fail to really recognize or pay attention to the fact that it's a $6,000 engine, and it's a brand new, pretty much brand new OEM engine, and you don't see that every day. And because this EVO was rusty, the second worst part, or the most money I spent on this, is towards the rear, and it's actually with the fuel tank. And if you followed this build series long enough, you know I spent a lot of time on the fuel area, so let's move back there. Honestly, one of the things I'm happiest I got to do with this car is play with the JDM fuel tank and make sure it would fit. A rusty EVO is going to become an issue, I think, that more people are going to have to deal with in the United States. And the EVO 8 and EVO 9s are just pretty rare in the United States, but they're actually less rare in other parts of the world. So if you can get JDM parts that will actually fit and work okay, it's good to know that they will work. So especially when it came to the fuel tank, this one had a rusty fuel tank that was just leaking and had some other issues. If you go back and watch some of my video series with the build, some not so good work done putting the fuel pump in and stuff like that. So this fuel tank just needed to be removed, and I did that. I got the JDM fuel tank to fit. It actually fit just fine. There were definitely some modifications that needed to be made, but I did swap that out, and then the fuel fill hose was actually leaking as well. Again, discontinued part. You cannot get a brand new gas tank for a US market EVO 8 or 9. You can't get the brand new fuel fill hose for an EVO 8 or 9. So I went the JDM route as well for the fuel fill hose. And I made that work. I don't think I actually made a video about that because it works, but I don't think I'd recommend other people doing it unless you really, really had to. But this is a cost pricing video, and I did spend about $800 on the fuel system, as I would call it, towards the back. I also bought the fuel injectors. I'm kind of counting the fuel injectors as part of the engine cost, as if I would sell the engine as it is with the injectors in it. So in the back pricing, we have about $800 in fuel system stuff. Again, fuel tank, all the gaskets, all the miscellaneous nuts and bolts and different things I need. Again, I made a full video about a JDM fuel tank and a lot more information just about the fuel tanks on an EVO in general. That's like 40 minutes long. So if you really are interested in the EVO fuel tank, I recommend you check out that video. On top of the $16,000 invested total in this car, there was actually over $1,000 worth of warranty work that was still covered by Mitsubishi's warranties on the EVOs and some Lancers. That was for the front cross member and the front lower control arms. So if I had to pay for those, if it wasn't covered under warranty, that would have been another additional $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 that I would have had to have paid to get this car functioning as it is as well. So that is a quick breakdown of how much money I've spent and where I've spent the money on this ugly EVO build. And I don't make this video to brag about how much money I've spent on this car. It's really more to show you guys how much it can cost to build something like this. And especially if you watch my roller build of my black EVO, you know that all these little things add up and you end up spending a lot of money. And even in this case, this was a full car where I technically shouldn't have had to have bought many things. Like I didn't need to buy the transmission, I didn't need to buy the transfer case, little nuts and bolts. I still had to buy some little nuts and bolts because a lot of those broke off because they were rusty. But again, the main point is I have technically over $16,000 invested in this car, and right now it's for sale for $14,500, and it's not selling, you know, like that. And there's a reason for that. Like usually if you can save up your money for the EVO that you want, you might be better off financially just buying that EVO. Hopefully if it was done right, that was, you know, a good EVO, good investment, even if you're spending a little bit more for that EVO. However, I will say I don't like regret doing this car the way I did, of course, because I'm kind of a YouTuber. I like to do this YouTube video stuff for fun. I like to try to share some knowledge of what I learn along the way, document the differences between the EVOs, things like that. So for me, I certainly don't regret it, but it wasn't the best financial decision, of course, at this point. But who knows, maybe further down the line, some of my videos will bring in some more ad revenue and it will pay off in the long run, who knows. And also, you can't really put a price on the fun that you can have with a car when it's done. I got to go ice racing with this car like 3 times, brought it spectator racing twice. So the fact that I got to do those things, and anyone that actually does racing knows how much those can kind of add up and how much you usually end up spending on the cost to go racing. So if I do happen to actually sell this car for, you know, just a little bit under what I have invested in it, and I got to beat on it, have some fun, cool, you know. That sounds like a win to me. One final item I want to talk about with this car, as I'm telling everyone that is potentially looking at buying it, I do recommend new chassis legs, that it would need new chassis legs. And I did recently get a quote, and I thought other people might be interested in the price for the actual chassis legs that you can get, basically the JDM versions, which should work. Haven't done it yet, of course, so I'm not going to fully say it will, but from what I gather, you could definitely make those ones work. But they're going to run you just under $2,000 most likely right now. A lot of prices are in flux with stuff in the world right now with inflation and supply chain issues. But just a heads up, if you were looking at rear chassis legs, I was looking through Ross Sport. You may have heard me mention their website before, but that is also going to be an option for me with this car potentially in the future. It will cost probably more to get them replaced than it would to buy them, referring to the rear chassis legs. But at that point, if I replace the rear chassis legs in this car, then I have a really good to go, I would say. That's one of the final things I would really want to fix on this car before I'd feel, you know, really good about driving this car, you know, almost anywhere. It would still look ugly. It would still have some rust here in other spots, but that's okay because that's kind of what I'd like to have. I'd like to have an ugly, rusty, well, I don't want rust, but you know what I mean. I don't mind that one would be rusty as long as it's actually solid and safe to drive. So that's it for this video, guys. I just thought I'd share a breakdown of where I've spent a lot of the money on this car. If you are interested in purchasing, I guess this was kind of maybe a for sale ad for this thing, but I'm located in Wisconsin, and you can message me if you are interested in buying. If not, that's cool too. I'll just keep it and have some fun with it, or have you know, a lot of spare parts for my other EVO. As always, this is Paul from Boosted Film saying thanks so much for watching. Covered, warranty, blah, we're starting that over. Half now, and I'm just gonna speak a little bit better. But most people fail to